Is the weekday broadcast and recording of the unpublished writings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Today I continue with chapter 5 from the Gospel of Mathew and Yogananda's commentaries on that chapter, and in his series that he entitled The Second Coming of Christ. You might ask, what did he mean by the second coming of Christ? Well, Christ, the universal consciousness of God in creation, comes to us first in the outer form of a true guru. The second coming of the Christ is the purpose of the guru's coming, which is to awaken that Christ consciousness, that divine consciousness in our own hearts. And so he described his work. You could say he described himself, but technically he described his work as embracing the second coming. I've been quoting Mathew here, in which his famous line of Jesus is, "I came to fulfill the law and prophets, not destroy them." And the fulfilling of the role of the Satguru, the true guru, in human affairs, is this second coming, is this awakening of the inner Christ, the inner Guru, the inner divine consciousness. And this one is from Mathew, as I continue through Mathew chapter 5, is verses 23 to 26. And he entitled his brief commentary as, "First be reconciled to thy brother." So let me read the verses first. "Therefore, if thou bring your gift to the altar, and there remembered that thy brother hath aught against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift." And then he goes on further, he extends this thought further, in the words of Jesus, "Agree with thine adversary quickly, whilst thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. Verily I say to thee, thou shalt by no means come out thence, till thou hast paid the uttermost farthing." Now, this quotation and Yogananda's interpretation of it is an excellent example of how Yogananda brings to light the deeper meaning and more relevant application. Most of us don't fear going to prison, for example. A deeper meaning of Jesus' words. So I'll quote some of his thoughts. First, he starts by saying, because Mathew or Jesus says, "If thou bring thy gift to the altar." So, first thing as Yogananda does is to clarify that this isn't really about bringing a physical gift to a physical altar. I mean, that's the image, that was appropriate image in the day of Jesus in Jerusalem and so forth. But he says, God doesn't need your material gifts. No one can really present a gift to God because all things belong to God, were made by God. And what the best gift, the one thing that God doesn't have, is our attention, our interest, and truly our love. And so God loves the gift of love, peace, and devotion offered in the temple of one's own heart, or through the temples of the hearts of others. And so that is why Jesus said that before you try to offer a gift to God in a temple made of stones, you should offer him a temple of harmony by being reconciled to an estranged brother or sister. To please an estranged friend is to please God. It is good to please God in the heart of a reconciled friend first, and then offer a gift of your love in the temple afterward. So, just like the Beatitudes, it's the true understanding of Jesus' words is like it is with the Yoga Sutras when they speak of ahimsa and nonviolence. It's more than just not slugging somebody or murdering people. We covered that a few verses before. It's what occurs in the heart, and we'll find that theme continuing as I continue in future days with chapter 5. And as to the prison, here's what Yogananda said. It is Better to become reconciled to an enemy than to be thrown into the prison of hatred by the anger due to inharmony. Inharmony resulting from enmity is the judge, and the officer which throws one into the prison of inner disturbance. Verily, no one can come out of the prison of inharmony unless he loses the last farthing of anger from within himself. So he's interpreting that last sentence of Jesus quoted in verse 26, that thou shalt by no means come out thence till thou hast paid the uttermost farthing. Now, what happens if your enemy or brother, whatever, the person with whom you have an issue is dead, isn't present, or doesn't want to talk to you and doesn't want to reconcile? Both of those things are fairly common. Sometimes even if you approach with reconciliation, you might be taken advantage of, might be misunderstood. There's lots of other reasons why the literal interpretation of Jesus' words are just impractical. But it's all about your heart, and if you can convince or win over the heart of someone with whom you've had an issue, that's even better. But start with your heart. It's in our own hearts that our judgment, our anger, our enmity towards another person must be reconciled. We can't give our love and devotion to God if we are at odds in our own heart with other people and even circumstances in the world around us. That's why we say in the path of yoga so often that what good does it do to march angrily for peace? What good does it do to commit acts of violence in the name of peace? It's absurd, of course, but that's really what he's talking about here. A wise man must not lose the consciousness of the omnipresence of God by being unable to see him hidden behind the smoke screen of hatred thrown around an enemy brother's heart. Well, reconciling oneself to the world is different than bringing, for the world solving its problems. We can do what we can, I suppose, to solve the world's problems, but in truth, the problems begin with us, with our own dissatisfaction with what we see. When we are content within ourselves, then our very contentment radiates outward peacefully and can do more to solve issues, at least the ones that we have the karma and opportunity to contribute towards, than other things that we might do. And there's nothing wrong with donating to worthy causes or getting involved with things like that, if that's what we feel to do. But first, find it in our own hearts. Now, Yogananda also, or Swami Kriyananda tells the story where Yogananda was disciplining one of the monastics there at Mount Washington. And I don't think it was Swami, but I think one of his brother disciples was sitting in the room as Yogananda marched up and down in the room scolding another monastic. And he was, raising the roof. Is that the correct idea or idiom? But when he turned his back to the person he was scolding and made eye contact with the monastic who was sitting observing, he would wink. And when Jesus went into the temple to throw out the money changers, he let loose with fury. But was he angry with those people? And so this topic brings up naturally the question of what is, or is there, righteous anger? And there is. Swami Kriyananda would use the example, if your little toddler or a small child goes running out into the street, and you're the parent, you say, "Oh, dear Johnny, don't run into the street." Wham! Of course not. You grab the little bugger and you maybe give him a paddling, if that's helpful. Nowadays, I know people don't seem to do that, but I remember once, I only did it once to my own son. I gave him a spanking on his butt because he did something really stupid. But they turned and he looked at me like, "What's wrong with you?" And I realized in that moment more completely that my son, who is very rational, extremely rational in fact, that's how he's raising his own children now. He talks to them and explains everything. It's all very nice. But anyway, that the physical part of correction was not necessary for his temperament. And I think that's increasingly the case now in our culture. But it was not the case in my upbringing. I don't know that I really needed it, but maybe I did. Soap in the mouth, and my father would take off his leather belt and, give us a few whacks. I don't really know if I needed that, but I'd like to think not. But I got it, and it never really bothered me particularly. So, there is a place for doing what you have to do if in the disciplining of children, or, sometimes you just have to raise your voice, okay? You shouldn't be a doormat. So these teachings are always nuanced in that way. But even a soldier or a policeman apprehending, or in a war even killing somebody, you don't have to hate that person. In fact, you shouldn't. In the few times in my life where I had to administer something that was difficult, even if, like with a parent who gets upset with their child, even if there is some of that, if it's your duty to do it, sometimes you just can't and shouldn't wait until you're perfectly calm. You just do the best you can. But I've never done it when, if ever, I would have thought I was getting revenge or actually wanting to somehow punish somebody. I would not have. But in all the cases I can think of, I always had at the core, even if I was irritated, I won't say angry, but irritated, that this was the best thing I felt sincerely that I had to do, and the best thing for the highest for that person. So you do the best you can, as Swami Kriyananda would often say. We're doing the best we can. So we have to take these teachings into our life with a certain amount of discernment and wisdom. I think I'll leave it there. And this is the end of this current week. And so you will presumably have a broadcast next from my wife, Nayaswami Padma. Okay, great souls. I'm going to sign off.